By the sixth interruption, the chamber was no longer a room of calm debate, it was an arena. Ted Cruz leaned forward, voice sharp, words slicing through Jasmine Crockett's sentence before it even reached the halfway mark. His hand chopped the air, his tone laced with the kind of impatience that screamed arrogance more than authority. Spectators shifted in their seats. The air thickened with tension. And there she was, Representative Jasmine Crockett, eyes locked, jaw set, body completely still. Unlike Cruz, she wasn't moving frantically or speaking over anyone. She waited, as though time itself was bending around her patience. Cruz kept pressing, kept interrupting, desperate to dominate the exchange. But with every interruption, his control slipped. His voice grew sharper, his tone shriller. By the sixth one, his arguments weren't landing, they were unraveling. And that's when it happened. Crockett's pause. The silence before the storm. She inhaled, leaned forward, and prepared to deliver her seventh line. A line that wouldn't just end an argument, but break a man who had built his career on interrupting others. And when she finally spoke, the chamber and the internet exploded. Why did this moment matter so much? After all, interruptions are nothing new in Washington. They're as common as filibusters and sound bites. But this clash wasn't just about parliamentary etiquette, it was about power, respect, and identity. Ted Cruz had made a career of steamrolling through conversations, cutting off opponents mid-sentence, and wielding arrogance like a weapon. For him, interruptions weren't slips of passion, they were strategy. They projected dominance. They said, "I will control this narrative whether you like it or not." And sitting across from him was Jasmine Crockett, a freshman representative to some, but to millions of Americans, a rising voice unwilling to bow. She didn't just represent herself. She embodied every person who had ever been silenced, spoken over, or dismissed in the halls of power. That's why the stakes were higher than a simple clash of words. This was about whether dignity could stand tall against arrogance, whether composure could triumph over chaos, whether America was ready to see a new kind of leadership emerge from the shadows of old politics. But to truly grasp the weight of this showdown, we need to see who Ted Cruz really was in this moment. Ted Cruz, to some a sharp debater, to others the embodiment of political arrogance. Born in Canada, raised in Texas, Cruz rose through the conservative movement as a man who loved to hear his own voice and to silence others. From filibustering against healthcare reform for 21 straight hours, reading Dr. Seuss on the Senate floor, to becoming one of Donald Trump's fiercest defenders despite being insulted by him during the 2016 campaign, Cruz built his career on contradictions. But one trait was constant: his interruptions. He prided himself on breaking the flow of others, overwhelming them with sheer persistence. His critics called it bullying. His allies called it assertiveness. Either way, it left him with a reputation. Ted Cruz talks, others listen. Yet beneath that confidence was a fragile foundation. The more he pressed, the more his arguments frayed. The louder he grew, the more transparent his insecurity became. And on this day, with Jasmine Crockett across from him, his strategy was on full display. He interrupted, cut off, dismissed. He tried every tool in his arsenal to keep her voice beneath his. But this wasn't just arrogance. It was fear. Because Cruz knew, the louder Jasmine's voice grew, the smaller his own seemed. And that's why, when Crockett stayed calm, when she refused to bow to his interruptions, the mask began to slip. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't just another target. She had walked through fire long before she entered this chamber. To understand Jasmine Crockett, you have to understand where she came from. Born and raised in St. Louis, Jasmine didn't come into politics from privilege. She came through struggle, through service, through a lifetime of watching injustice play out in communities that were too often ignored. Before she was ever a representative in Congress, Crockett was a public defender. Day after day, she fought for people who couldn't afford fancy lawyers, people who had already been counted out by a system stacked against them. In those courtrooms, interruptions weren't strategy, they were a matter of life and freedom. And Jasmine learned how to cut through noise with clarity. Her rise in politics wasn't scripted. It was earned. She wasn't born into power, she fought her way into it. And every step of the way she was underestimated. They said she was too young, too inexperienced, too radical. Yet, each criticism became fuel. By the time she entered Congress, Crockett carried not just her own story, but the stories of thousands of silenced voices. She knew what it meant to be interrupted, dismissed, underestimated, and she knew how to stand taller because of it. That's why, when Ted Cruz interrupted her not once, not twice, but 6 times in a single exchange, Jasmine didn't crack. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't mirror his arrogance. She waited. She understood something Cruz didn't. Power isn't in how loud you speak. It's in how well you listen, how patiently you build, and how decisively you strike. And that's why, when the moment came for her 7th response, she didn't just answer him. She dismantled him. Back in the chamber, the scene unfolded like a slow-motion duel. First interruption. Cruz cut her off, claiming she was dodging. She calmly picked up where she left off. Second interruption. He waved his hand, dismissing her words before she finished. She leaned forward, her voice steady. Third interruption. Louder this time, his tone edged with frustration. She met his gaze but didn't flinch. Fourth interruption. His voice cracked with impatience, growing shrill. Her body language remained still a fortress of composure. Fifth interruption. Cruz leaned so far forward, it was almost a physical invasion of space. Crockett didn't lean back. She didn't surrender a single inch. Sixth interruption. The breaking point. Cruz raised his voice, cut her off mid-syllable, and tried to pivot the narrative entirely. The chamber stirred, some shifting uncomfortably, others smirking. But what few realized was that Crockett wasn't losing ground. She was building momentum. Each interruption was Cruz burning fuel, losing credibility, while she remained untouched. And then came the silence. That pause before the 7th line. The chamber grew still. Even Cruz, in his eagerness to dominate, didn't see what was coming. And that's when Jasmine Crockett prepared to unleash the line that would haunt him for years. The silence was louder than Cruz's interruptions. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice low but unshakable. She didn't need volume, she had precision. "Senator," she began, calm as steel, "you've interrupted me 6 times now. 6 times you've tried to stop me from finishing a sentence. But the truth is, every interruption only proves my point that when faced with facts, your only defense is to silence them." The room froze. Her words sliced deeper than any insult, because they weren't just about him, they were about a pattern America had seen too many times. She continued, "You don't fear me. You fear the truth I represent. You fear a woman who won't bow. You fear the dignity of those you've tried to silence for years finally speaking louder than your interruptions." Gasped. Cruz shifted uncomfortably, his face tightening. He tried to interject again, but the weight of her words pressed him down. Even his allies glanced away. And then came the final blow, the 7th line. "If your arguments had strength, Senator, you wouldn't need to interrupt me. The fact that you can't let me finish tells the world everything about you, and nothing about me." Boom! The chamber erupted, some in shock, others in awe. Cruz's lips parted, but no words came. He had been silenced not by volume, but by dignity. And in that moment, Jasmine Crockett didn't just win an exchange. She rewrote the rules of debate. But the true explosion wasn't in the chamber. It was what happened once the clip hit the outside world. Within minutes, the clip was online. Twitter lit up first. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Crockett versus Cruz. Hashtag 7th line. Hashtag mic drop moment. Memes spread like wildfire. Cruz silenced mid-interruption. Crockett's poised face frozen as the new symbol of composure. Instagram Reels replayed her line with cinematic edits. Dramatic music layered behind her voice. TikTok creators added captions. "This is what dignity looks like." Even late-night hosts joined the frenzy, replaying the exchange with knowing smiles. Supporters flooded Crockett's social media with praise. "Thank you for standing tall. This is why we need new voices in Congress." That 7th line? Legendary. Even critics admitted the damage. Cruz's defenders scrambled, claiming bias, claiming unfair editing. But it didn't matter. The truth was raw, uncut, undeniable. For once, the bully had been silenced not by force, but by words. And beyond politics, the moment resonated with something deeper. Every student who had been talked over in class, every worker dismissed in a meeting, every voice ignored in a conversation, they all saw themselves in Jasmine Crockett. The shockwaves weren't just political, they were cultural. But beneath the memes and hashtags lay something even greater. A lesson that would outlive the viral moment. The lesson of the seventh line wasn't about political parties. It wasn't even just about Cruz or Crockett. It was about something bigger, dignity versus arrogance. Ted Cruz believed power came from talking over others, from dominating space, from refusing to let anyone else finish. But Jasmine Crockett proved the opposite. Real power doesn't come from volume. It comes from patience, clarity, and truth delivered at the right moment. Her victory wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic in tone. It was precise, measured, and unshakable. And that's what made it devastating. In a world where arrogance often drowns out dignity, Crockett's stand was a reminder. Silence can be louder than shouting. Truth can outlast interruptions. And earned respect will always rise above ego. This wasn't just a chamber exchange. It was a mirror for America. Because every time dignity triumphs over arrogance, every time truth stands tall against bluster, we inch closer to the country we want to be. And that's why the seventh line wasn't just about Jasmine Crockett destroying Ted Cruz. It was about all of us realizing that sometimes the calmest voice in the room is the one that changes everything. So let's circle back. Ted Cruz interrupted Jasmine Crockett 6 times. 6 times he tried to silence her. 6 times he thought arrogance would overpower dignity. But it was the seventh line, calm, surgical, undeniable, that broke him. That's not just a political moment. That's a lesson for all of us. In every classroom, every workplace, every debate, we face people who try to silence us. And sometimes, the most powerful response isn't to match their volume, but to let dignity speak louder than arrogance. Jasmine Crockett reminded America of that truth. And now it's on us to carry it forward. If you believe dignity should always stand taller than arrogance, if you believe truth deserves to finish its sentence, then join us. Subscribe, share this video, and let's make sure voices like Jasmine's are never silenced again. Because at the end of the day, the seventh line didn't just break Ted Cruz. It built something stronger. A reminder that no interruption can stop the truth.